evening, everyone. Good morning, and welcome to this Indic Book Club Author Q&A. I am your host, Abhinav Agarwal, and I have with me best-selling author, a feat he has achieved with his very first book. It is not only the #1 ranked book in several categories in Amazon, but within, I think, a couple of days of its release, it also hit the top 5 bestseller rank. I'm not sure, Rahul, if it became #1, but it has been a runaway bestseller. And as I started reading the book, I reached out to Rahul and asked him if he'd be willing to come to our IBC Author Q&A session, and he very graciously agreed. So the book is, you can see it in my background. It's called Sanghi, Who Never Went to a Shakha, and it has got endorsements and blurbs by such people as Amish Tripathi, Bibek Debroy, the Honorable Ministers, Smriti Irani, R. Jagannathan, Sanjeev Sanya, Mohandas Pai, Vivek Agnihotri. So it's literally a galaxy of very eminent people from various different walks of life who have endorsed this book. And as I started to read this book, I got a couple of feelings from it. The first one was that it is how to use, when I first thought of that, Rahul, I had the words that came to my mind were stream of consciousness. And then as I read further along, I actually came across these words that you mentioned in your book with respect to some author that your father, strongly encouraged you to read. So, but honestly, that was the feeling that this is a stream of consciousness book. It reads like a part memoir, which it is. And it is also a commentary on the social environment, the political environment of the times as you grew up over the decades. And now that I can use that book to figure out how young or how old you are, and we leave that as a quiz for our readers. You talk essentially from the time of the 1980s, growing up, and some of the epical events of the 80s, a decade from the assassination of Mrs. Indira Gandhi, and then the fall of the Congress government in 1989, and then in 1991, opening of the Indian economy. 1992, we had the Babri Masjid demolition, and then 2001. You talk about several events that happened in 2001. Now, before I start, I'll make one more public service announcement, which is that this Q&A is being broadcast live on the Zoom webinar as well as on Facebook, and you can. We will also be uploading this to YouTube once we have the recording processed. You can send in your questions through the Q&A chat panel on this webinar, and we will take those questions up after the Q&A is over. So I'll start off with one very basic question, Rahul. So, you write, you co-founded Op India, and you have a substantial following on Twitter, and your articles, when you write them, they attract a substantial amount of viewership, readership, feedback, engagement, and so on. Now, if you look at a book, if you look at it in terms of just eyeballs, a book reaches only a small fraction of the people that social media engagement reaches. So, and a book frankly takes an order of magnitude or orders of magnitude more effort to write, put together, find a publisher, get it edited, and so on, and then promote it and all. Why? Why did you choose to write a book?
Right. So first of all, obviously, thank you for inviting me, and thanks to Indic Academy that not only for hosting this chat, but also helping many people read this book. Through the academy, asking them to review. So it's a good a new culture, not exactly a new culture, but or rather it is a new culture that's being cultivated about reading, because that's something that has been lacking. I mean, it's not something I have written in my book, but there was once a time while growing up, somebody put into in my head that go and read abroad, study abroad, and that was pretty early, while I was still in the school. And in the what's that, Ashok Rajpath, it's called, I think, of Patna. There used to be many bookshops, and there you could pick up some guides and all that. And one of those things that I picked up was a guide of SAT, Scholastic Aptitude Test, which used to, I think, for the higher studies, I mean, higher school, basically in US. Obviously, I had no idea how does it work, and my parents didn't have that kind of money to send me abroad. But out of curiosity, I picked it up. The maths part, obviously, I found it pretty easy. And then I saw that almost half of it, that test, which apparently gets you into the high schools of US, half of it was about reading comprehension, and that and same is the thing with GMAT and other exams over there. But that thing is so early cultivated, in US, that I realized pretty early, that in India we don't have that. We haven't encouraged that culture of reading. There you have almost half the weightage of your aptitude is being given to how well you read and comprehend things. So, and this is completely almost lacking over here. I mean, the literature classes, or the language classes rather, that we go through in schools, it's a sham. It's it's a joke. So good that the Indic Academy is cultivating that culture, where we start reading up, where we the long forms, and especially in current times, when which brings to your question also, that when there is social media and there is so much easy, I mean, the habit is there to read up very small stuff. I mean, forget articles. I mean, you just have to read a few slides on Instagram, or a couple of tweets on Twitter, and that's and you're reading for the day is done, kind of a thing. And obviously, me being rather decently followed on Twitter, and many of my tweets, which captures some of my thoughts, and to be very immodest, I would say, capture very in a well way, using very limited characters, that I had that ability to express, and they have gone very much viral. So it indeed becomes in a way that disincentivizes you to write a book. When your thoughts,
Correct.
when your articles, I mean, once a while, when I write the articles, or whatever thought I'm basically expressing, when they are so quickly and so easily getting viral, and literally people in lakhs, or on occasions millions, are reading you, why would you put in so much effort in writing so much more than what you can manage in an article and a tweet, and reach literally a fraction of that audience? I mean, like, if in 10,000 copies of your book sells in India, it's supposed to be such a great achievement. And if I look at my tweets, perhaps every one of it will have more than 10,000. I mean, much more than that, obviously, in terms of impressions. So it's actually, I mean, when I look back, that why I decided to write a book, when I could have maybe written a few articles, or maybe even tweets. It's an interesting question. I think the reason why I decided to write was one, that I strongly felt that this is a story that I should share, and this is a story that cannot be said in a few tweets or in a few articles. So that very strong urge, that I need to document it, that I need to express it, was there. To be honest, perhaps I was not at all looking at it becoming a bestseller, or I'm making money out of it. Obviously, you know better than others that authors hardly make money in this country. So that was not. I mean, unless obviously you are Chetan Bhagat, or these such type of celeb authors, and your millions of your copies are selling. So idea was really, I was not, there was not any big number that I was looking at when I started writing it, or when I decided to write about it. And perhaps that's why I was able to write and finish it, because it was driven more by a strong belief, a strong urge that I need to document what has happened. And which was not just about me. It's not that I thought that I'm so important that people should know my story. But then everyone is important and unique in that sense. I mean, everyone has a story to say. But this was essentially a story of a generation. You know, many people were going through similar beliefs, and you have multitude of books, articles analyzing why things have changed on 2014 elections, on 2019 elections. But I thought that narrative somewhere was missing. You know, people were mostly looking at the entire thing as Modi and Shah, or as BJP, or as IT cell and stuff like that. But it's a story that goes much beyond that, and it's a story that goes much beyond 2014 and 2019.
Correct. Correct.
So that was a strong belief why I thought that, you know, I should write it. Uh,
Correct. Makes sense. And
yeah.
see, the other thing that I felt is that one of the drawbacks of social media has been that in many ways our collective memory doesn't extend beyond
Right.
5 or 10 tweets. So sometimes
Mhm.
people forget that what happened a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years back, 20 years back has a has sometimes a very major role to play in the events that unfold before us. And some of these things you have captured very nicely in your book,
Mhm.
and you describe some of those through your physical journey through India itself, from
Right.
Patna to Delhi at IIMC, and then to Ahmedabad for your MBA at IIM Ahmedabad, and the thoughts that traveled with you when you moved to Ahmedabad and how they changed over the course of I think the 2 years that you were there at
Right.
the B school. And one thing that struck me was that ideology has always been present at least some of these institutions.
Mhm.
It is not in your face ideology. It is not
Right.
as rabid as the woke culture ideology that we see, unfortunately, today. But
Mhm.
it has always been there. And
Right.
you also write that you were by not only no means a Sanghi, you were not even something who would consider himself a rightist.
Mhm.
Your first transition happened where you started to become a right winger more in the economic sense than in
True.
any other sense.
Right.
Uh, so why? Uh, so tell me at IIMC, right, the Institute of Mass Communication, where I think you did a 1 year or a 10-month program.
Right. Right.
How when you first
Technically 1 year. Yeah.
Correct. So when you first experienced this that you now identify as some sort of an ideological
Mhm.
bent, leaning, and all,
Mhm.
how did you recognize it? Did you recognize it at the time, or was that insight only through hindsight? And what were your reactions? You talk a little bit about it, but I want you to elaborate somewhat more on it.
Right. I mean, as you rightly said, it's been documented in my book. See, to be honest, it's mostly in hindsight. You know, I mean, even though while I was studying at IIMC, I was 22 years, 21 years old. That's good enough an age when many people do have an understanding of ideology and stuff like that, or maybe many people actually don't. I mean, many times when you see those popular vox pops, people have absolutely no idea. They don't even know who is the president of the country and stuff like that. Forget, I mean, you can well imagine what they might be thinking about ideology. So I was definitely not so clueless, but I was a very an ordinary guy in that sense that I did not have much of an idea what ideology is. I, just to an extent that, in the history books or in popular culture, that, there is a communist party, and when we were growing, there was this whole talk of Cold War and all. Whether you understand it or not, at least you are exposed to such terms, through newspapers or through people talking around you sometimes. So you have vague idea of what it is. But to be pretty honest, while studying for journalism, I didn't have much of an idea that there could be ideological camps, for example. I could just think that okay, these are different thoughts, different political way of thinking, and maybe later on when people join active politics and they get into all these things. But the fact that many people see it almost as a religion, or even more important than religion, was completely
Why?
lost at me. Yeah.
Why? Because see,
Yeah.
धर्म मजहब के नाम पे people
Hmm.
get very very passionate, वो समझ में
Right.
आता है, ठीक है.
Right.
पर ये वामपंथी विचारधारा जिसके पीछे लोग इतने बौखला से जाते हैं,
Hmm.
after all it is just a line of thought, and if
Hmm.
someone can present better arguments and facts and data,
Hmm.
तो shouldn't a reasonably intelligent man say कि हाँ ठीक है, मेरी सोच गलत थी, या
Hmm.
फिर जो मुझे बताया गया था वो गलत था, तो अब जैसे किसी ने कहा है ना कि when facts present themselves, the
Hmm.
smart man changes his view.
Hmm.
तो and you talk about, I think आज तक one
Right.
of your experiences कि
Hmm.
आप जब ये आई थिंक जब
The Godhara.
गोधरा
Right.
के राइट्स ट्रेन जब जलाई गई थी,
Train
तब
chapter.
तब वहां पे जो एडिटर था, एंड वो उन्हें पता था कि लाइक किन का काम है,
Right.
पर
Right.
खुल के कह नहीं सकते हैं.
Right.
एंड
Right.
हियर इज वेयर आई वांट टू आस्क यू, ये रिस्पॉन्सिबल जर्नलिज्म का फंडा क्या है?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, which is I mean, like an entire chapter is devoted to that. तो अभी पूरी बुक तो मैं नहीं बताऊंगा, लोग को पढ़ने भी चाहिए. But the thing is that your first question, that why people don't realize, I was a little I didn't really understand whether it was about why people like me don't realize, or why people who are invested into those ideologies don't realize.
एक्चुअली
uh,
गुड दैट यू ब्रॉट दैट अप. इट्स बोथ वेज.
right.
See, एक तो यह है कि like the people who are at these institutions, they have a certain ideology, and
Right.
वो उसमें I can kind of understand that they have been so invested in it that
Right.
they cannot bring themselves to consider the fact कि वो जो अपने सारा जीवन भर जो सोचते आए हैं वो गलत है.
Exactly.
कोई
Exactly.
भी इंसान ये मानना नहीं चाहता है. I can understand
Right.
that from a psychological
Right.
point of view, but
Right.
youngsters are much more open to questioning things, right?
Right.
By nature.
Precisely.
बट
Right.
फिर भी उनको इस तरह से ब्रेन वॉश या हर्ड मेंटालिटी में भर दिया जाता है, तो हाउ डज दैट हैपन?
Precisely. That's where I think I have briefly touched upon it also. Now, one of the challenges of my book was that it touches upon so many topics, and that was the nature of the book, because it has that expanse, because the kind of social churn that we are going through, socio-political churn rather, it does have so many aspects to it, whether it's electoral politics or culture, religion, education. So almost every of those topics that I have touched, they need a independent books, a independent book or a series of books on themselves, actually. So maybe perhaps I didn't elaborate too much upon it, but I think towards the end, especially in the last chapter, I have touched upon it, which whereas what you are talking about comes up early in my book, but why it happens kind of comes later, very briefly in my book, is that these people have you have to give it to them that they are so expert in in presenting themselves as rebels, in presenting themselves as someone who are anti-establishment, that the youngsters don't even realize that they need to question the very things that they are adopting as something rebellious. So while the entire left, especially in current times as we talk, the entire most of the so-called left is all about actually preserving and conserving their power and their spheres of influence. So in that sense, they are the conservatives, that they are trying to conserve their power, they are trying to conserve the status quo, but yet despite that, they are able to present themselves as some kind of rebel, somebody who is at constant fight trying to change something, someone, or a group of people who are, trying to, they have created imaginary enemies, imaginary demons, and they are always fighting, and that excites young people, like, okay, you किसी हिंदी मूवी का है भी, यूथ बदलेगा इस देश को. So, so I have forgotten that, but that's a very funny expression that the actor gives. Some character actor is only there. So, and that's how the youth gets into that romanticism of that we are here to change something. And it's actually the crying change that this society needs, or this education system, or this entire system needs, is the change from the same old ghisa pita left kind of thing. Yet these people are so accomplished in their art, in their trade, that they are able to present themselves as fighting, and fighting for change, or fighting for justice, whereas it's actually them who are controlling everything. So
You know,
so
you,
that's why.
you touched upon, conservative and this thing. So
Hmm.
uh, in your book, you talk very briefly about it, and then you
Right,
also, as your change happened, you talk about it. And
right.
some of the phrases that you use, they have, at least for the last several years, they have sort of triggered me. When I read those phrases, I get very,
Hmm.
very irritated. So one is, socially liberal, fiscally conservative.
Hmm.
एंड मुझे कई बार लगता है कि लोग ये चार लफ्ज यूज तो कर लेते हैं, उन्हें कोई
Hmm.
अता पता नहीं होता है कि इसका मतलब
Hmm.
क्या है, बट
Right.
इट इज समथिंग दैट मेक्स देम look or
Good about it.
appear
Hmm.
intelligent. And
True.
the people who adopt these labels tend to be fiscally very, very profligate and socially very, very illiberal. दूसरा
Exactly, exactly.
दूसरा जो है
Yeah.
कि लोग
Uh,
कहते हैं कि मैं स्पिरिचुअल हूं, मैं रिलीजियस नहीं हूं.
uh, right.
And you talk about it that your एक point in your transition जब हुआ है, you said you were now, and I quote, religiously atheist but
Mhm.
culturally Hindu.
Right. That's how I fancied myself to be, I have written.
Good,
Yeah.
good, good.
Yeah.
तो
Yeah.
इसका मतलब क्या है? I mean, as people
Uska,
use it.
right. Which I have, kind of explained that, that over years, the irritation that you kind of developed, I also developed. So I realized that these are really nice sounding buzzwords, that you adopt out of compulsion, that or out of lack of deep reading, and just to sound cool. So being libertarian was pretty cool, and I was also, despite this white beard today, at least at that time, I definitely could have said that I was young and I wanted to be cool. I still want to be cool, but but yeah, that's, being libertarian was cool, being socially liberal, fiscally conservative was cool, so I also adopted these cool things. So that's what I have even kind of mentioned, although, in on in theory, these things still don't really look that bad. But then we are not really living in a theoretical lab. We are living in a practical world, and that's where you start believing that, come on, I mean, you need to graduate out of that phase, and some people graduate, some don't.
Some don't, exactly. And इसमें I made a bunch of notes. I will
Hmm.
leave the best part for last, which is Kumar Sanu के गाने आपको बहुत बेहद पसंद हैं, but I'll leave that for the last. Uh,
Hmm.
See the. Uh, I'm trying to find so many things I want to talk to you about, but let's talk about. You'd say कि like one of the major sets of events that happened was in 2001. एक तो
Hmm.
था कि 9/11 के न्यूयॉर्क टेररिस्ट अटैक्स हुए थे.
Hmm.
दिसंबर में दिल्ली में पार्लियामेंट बिल्डिंग पे अटैक हुआ था.
Right. Hmm.
और उसके बेसिकली कितने 2-2.5 महीने बाद गोधरा में
Right.
कोच को पूरा जला दिया था. एंड कितने 58 बच्चे
59, I think.
और 59 59 लोग मर गए थे.
Hmm. Hmm.
बट You say that perhaps because social media was not there at that time, the
Right.
fallout for for society at large was not as much.
Right. Especially for
But
someone like me. Yeah.
so how was since you were, I think at that time you were at IIM Ahmedabad,
IIMC.
right?
IIMC. I
IIMC.
was studying at
So
journalism.
how were these events discussed then? In outside of the sphere of social media that didn't exist, the internet was basically still very very hardly शहरों के अलावा कहीं internet था नहीं India में.
Precisely.
So how was
Yeah.
the discussion, and more importantly, how was the narrative built around these events?
See, the dominating narrative obviously was of left. So despite 9/11, kind of changing the narrative in the West, where they finally started saying Islamic terrorists and stuff like that, uh, the same guys were obviously very pious anti-communist jihadis earlier, but the same lot became obscurantist and terrorist for them. But at least their hypocrisy aside, they did they at least it did wake them up. In India, I don't think that happened. I mean, forget we didn't even need to wait till 9/11. I have before. I mean, this is a country that has been ravaged by Islamist mentality. It has been partitioned by Islamist mentality, but we never came around discussing those things honestly. Yeah, and I mean, I'm talking about partition, but even after 2001 and after the parliament attack, even 9/11, and even after the Godhra thing. Godhra obviously was a little different, as I have written. That did cause people to believe that no, that the danger was real. But then the left and the Congress narrative was able to control the damage. One, by obviously using the Gujarat riots as the bigger sin, or as the bigger tragedy, and secondly, obviously, by denying what happened at Godhra. I mean, it's a genocide denial that they did through the that commission that Lalu Yadav was the rail minister.
Correct.
Nanavati, no, sorry.
नहीं नहीं नहीं, this
I'm
is
sorry.
Justice Ganguly.
Yeah,
I
I
think
think we
so.
both are kind of forgetting the judge name, but the commission, its mandate was to whitewash Godhra basically. Sorry. So while Bothra had that brief opportunity, or rather that kind of strong cause, I mean, it could have been a strong catalyst in changing the narrative that 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 the danger is right at your doorstep. They were able to contain it. But 9/11 and Parliament attack, obviously, it didn't. I mean, despite both of them being inspired from Islamist ideology, they were both turned into some kind of a political joke. I mean, like 9/11, yeah, वो तो अमेरिका का है, हमारा क्या जाता है? वो उनकी लड़ाई हो रही है, ये वो, and then obviously the usual thing that left did, that it's their own thing that's coming back to bite them, which
Correct.
in a way was true also, but at the same time you cannot ignore what those guys were up to. I mean, like Osama and other folks. uh, and whenever it comes to Islamist attacks in India, obviously everything is conveniently blamed on Pakistan, and conveniently blamed on political problem of Kashmir.
Correct.
And you never kind of, and both, what are both, the existence of Pakistan and political problem of Kashmir. There is nothing but Islamist mentality. Both. That's the only thing that defines both these things: the problem in Kashmir and why Pakistan exists. Yet you never actually discuss that thing. So when that wasn't discussed from ever since 1947 or even before that, it wasn't. And that control, that contour of narrative was preserved by them till till the time internet happened. So forget not only 2001 thing, these two things, as I have written in the later chapters also, the series of bomb blasts that's happened from 2004, 2005, 2006 to Mumbai terror attacks
Correct.
and forward. So this entire country was ravaged by these blasts,
But
all of
you,
them done by Islamic
correct.
terrorists. Yet we didn't. Yeah.
But you say the narrative began to change sometime in
Right.
2008-9.
Nine. Right. Yeah.
So even though ये जो 2G and Commonwealth Games के जो घोटाले थे वो UPA 1 में हुए थे, but
Hmm.
people didn't really know about them,
Right.
and till
Hmm.
Gopi Krishnan, he broke this on the
Hmm.
Pioneer, and uske baad I think Outlook and
Hmm.
Open magazine mein you write,
Right.
they published the audio transcripts, and then a certain gentleman went to the Supreme Court and पूरा ताला लगवा दिया सारे उन tapes पे,
Hmm.
और 10 साल के बाद
Hmm.
भी हमें पता नहीं ऐसा क्या उसमें personal बातें थी जो
Hmm.
but in any case you write about three things that happened.
Hmm.
One was the 2G का जो
Hmm.
revelations हुए.
Right.
दूसरा था 26/11 के जो टेररिस्ट अटैक्स हुए एंड उस पे जो मीडिया कवरेज
Right.
जिस तरह से, एंड उसमें चैतन्य कुंटे को लीगली थ्रेट्स दे दे के द
Right.
पुअर मैन वाज साइलेंस्ड.
Right.
And the third one was the leak of the Radia tapes.
Right.
So between 2001 and early 2002 and like 7, 8, 9 years
Hmm.
back,
Hmm.
obviously you say that the control of the narrative had slipped out of the establishment by
Yeah.
2009-10.
Slightly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it started slipping from 2008, 9, 10. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now I won't ask you कि like वो कैसे slip हुआ and all that, because a
Hmm.
lot of people at least will know कि how social media played a role. Orkut से शुरू
Hmm.
होके then you write about Twitter and all that.
Hmm.
If you look at it now 2021 में अब हम आ गए हैं, and
Hmm.
social
Hmm.
media has been there for at least 10-11-12 साल से इंडिया में तो
True.
रहा है.
Hmm. Hmm.
Do you think the establishment is regaining or trying to regain control over this narrative? And we saw in the 2020 US elections में how
True.
social media and these establishment media, they played more than a partisan role to switch the elections to their side. Do you think there is a possibility of that happening in 2022 when the UP elections take place next year, and 2024 when the general elections take place?
Yeah, it will. I mean, that's a global phenomenon that's happening. I mean, and which is what I have, one line that one short line that I have written in the book, that Twitter was liberal then, it's
Yes,
woke now.
woke, correct,
Yeah.
correct.
So that's something that's not going to leave India, obviously. Currently Twitter is playing its cards very smartly. Like yesterday they marked Modi's video, which was tweeted by some Congress guy, as manipulated media, trying to show that they are non-partisan and all that. It's all वो बकरी को घास खिला रहे हैं, वो जाकर हलाल करेंगे ईद के दिन, मोटा कर रहे हैं अभी. So it's not going to leave India. Obviously, what we saw in 2020 in US election, completely partisan behavior of the big tech, especially Twitter. That I think we will see. The good thing is that we do realize, like in India, we can see that perhaps more openly that this is happening, rather than in US, where I don't think, apart from Trump, or maybe to an extent Ted Cruz. And I'm to be honest, I'm not really too much into US politics, so I might be wrong also. But to an extent, I could understand. I don't think the mainstream right over there tried to make it shout about it too much. Whereas here, I do think people are talking about it. There is a little pushback from the government also in terms of like whatever they are asking Twitter to do. That you have to follow the laws of the land, and try whatever little they are trying to do. There is some sense of pushback. I had expected that, being a maverick that Trump is, he will do some hathola to these guys and put them put them in line, but unfortunately that didn't happen. So in that sense I was pretty dejected. Keep your India sake as एक्सपेक्ट करें अगर ट्रम्प ने कुछ नहीं किया तो। यहाँ तो हम ऐसे ही जरूरत से ज्यादा सेफ खेलते हैं। But this is definitely going to bite us unless people in the government, people in the ruling party realize that Twitter is I mean, they are snakes. They might sound a little uh, nice right now, that they are doing manipulated media for for Prime Minister Modi, and maybe if you ask them, and they will do some favor to you little bit here and there, इसको blue tick दे दो, उसको blue tick दे दो टाइप का, वो ऐसा करके वो आपको खुश रखेंगे। बट वो अल्टीमेटली वो खेल तो खेलेंगे, वो तो मुझे लगता है, आई एम नॉट वेरी ऑप्टिमिस्ट अबाउट इट। बट वेयर आई एम ऑप्टिमिस्ट is that in India we can talk about far more openly about it, that this bias exists. There is a little pushback from the government also. I think this Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces might run into a problem given the new IT guidelines. We might see, these things facing some heat. So this is where I have a little thing. But yeah, it's the wider issue is obviously the old establishment, the old media is trying to gain the same kind of censorship, the same kind of gatekeeping that they used to enjoy on the traditional media. And to a very large extent, they have been, in fact, to a very, very, very large extent, they have been successful, especially in the West.
So essentially, in some ways, I'm reminded of this one place in your book when you, I think, talk about who is it? O'Sullivan's Law.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us something about that? Because I found it very, very insightful, and it applies so much to even the Indian context.
True. Right. So O'Sullivan's is a British political commentator. I have forgotten when exactly, but sometime, I mean, it's not a very old.
1989, 90, if I remember.
Right. It's not very old law as such. But he said, and it's a very striking thing. When I also read about it first, it appeared that it's so obvious, yet we didn't realize it. So he says that unless an organization, whether it's a political organization or an educational institute, or even whatever, an NGO. So unless an organization is avowedly right wing, it will turn left wing over time. So and the reason he says why it happens is because the left is far more tribalist, far more intolerant of different differing views, and over the time the kind of selection, hiring process or inclusion process that seeps into an organization make sure that only people who agree with kind of comparatively left to start with, whoever are comparatively left, those who agree with them, they are hired only, and they prevail, and then it completely becomes a leftist organization. And obviously in today's world it becomes woke. So that's so clear. I mean, that's so true. You look at Twitter, Google, all these places, people who are culturally left, they are so vocal, they are so insistent on their rights. I mean, in Google they have gone and formed a union. I mean, obviously they and they are so dishonest also. They will keep on insisting that it has got nothing to do with politics, nothing to do with ideology. Same shit like the Islamist, nothing to do with a religion. I mean, it has got everything to do with your politics and ideology. And they have formed these unions, and they are vocal. That even smallest of the companies, they have to today they have to their say HR records will have to have space for your pronouns, your genders, stuff like that. So that's how it happens. The people who are the people on the left, they are so vocal, they are so insistent, and they are so intolerant in a way that they would insist that this is only the right way to do it, and over the time everything starts turning left. And he was so right.
That is so true. That is so
Yeah.
true. And now I have a whole lot of questions still to ask, but I also see that a lot of people have sent in their questions and chat panel and Q&A essays. So before I move to that, I'm sorry, Rahul, I have to ask you this. You mentioned Siddharth Vardarajan as one of your idols.
You're misquoting me.
नहीं, मेरे पास बुक के अंदर लिखा है, अभी नहीं, 10-15 साल पहले आपने कहा था, but that in my mind is enough to cancel you from the right wing.
No, but I have given a context that, when that was a time when I wasn't even aware what ideology is, and that's how people who think they are neutral or who think they are non-partisan actually end up in the left camp. So, and to be fair, I was never a fan of Siddharth Varadarajan. Yes, I did take his name when for a job interview as one of my favorite journalists, because those are the names that came into my mind, and I just vomited whatever I had remembered from my college days, the pre-journalism days, basically. So he was never my real kind of, I was never a fan of him. But something
ठीक
that
है.
I haven't put in my book, but it's definitely embarrassing, is that I had written a fan mail to Rajdeep Sardesai. I should have perhaps put in in the in the in the book, so that you can troll me. You could have trolled me better, but that was also in the first week of
See,
sorry, in the first year of my college. Yeah.
देखो राहुल, since हम बात कर ही रहे हैं कि like trolling and गड़े मुर्दों की,
Uh,
some people already know about it, and you probably
mm,
also may remember it, but I'll still put it out as a recording for everyone.
mhm.
I have an autographed first edition hardcover copy of Arundhati Roy's God of Small Things. यानी कि इतना पतन हो चुका था मेरा, और फिर भी अगर मैं उभर के आ सकता हूँ तो मुझे पूरा विश्वास है कि किसी के लिए भी ये संभव है.
Right. And Arundhati Roy features in my book also. Obviously, I didn't go to,
हाँ.
yeah, like for an autograph copy. But yeah, as I have written that she was all over. She was in a way people of my generation when we were in schools, or rather early college. In Bihar, college starts early after 10th itself. You start looking up to these people. So she was all over media, and she was one of the reasons even I thought that okay, being a writer is good. Having a book with your name on it is so cool. so so yeah, I mean
नहीं नहीं नहीं, बिल्कुल कूल नहीं है ये वो
uh,
जीवन की ऐसी घटनाएं होती हैं जो इंसान अपने
mm,
आजीवन सोचता रहता है कि लाइक कौन सा शनिचर चढ़ा था मेरे दिमाग पे एंड ऑल, बट इन एनी केस, in any case, so
mm,
before I move to the Q&A, I'll again
mm,
recap, guys. This is not only a memoir, this is a social commentary, and as you read it, at least I got the sense that I'm living through those times. It for it is a journey from a small town to a big town, then to another place. It's a journey through India as it changed. It is a journey of how one's thinking changes as one is exposed to counterfactual arguments that one sees, and the establishment, the dogma that prevails. And it is particularly well written. I think your training as a journalist helped. Your obviously, you are also a mathematician, a BSc in mathematics. So that focus also helped. But whatever it is, it's a very well written book. I could not
thank you.
stop. I couldn't put it down. It was like, it wasn't कि चलो आधा घंटा पढ़ के then I'll take a break and read it again. I kept reading it pretty much. I think I finished the book in 2 sessions. So I would strongly encourage everyone to give the book a read. Read it with an open mind. You'll see a lot of reflections of yourself, of parts of your life in it. So uh, thank you for writing such a wonderful book, Rahul. I'll take a
Thank you.
few questions. Well, okay, there's one a very interesting comment that we'll leave for the time being. But Manoj Gupta asks, the book is fine, but how do you see Indian politics in future, especially the fate of secularism? This can be an hour-long answer also, but I'll give you only 30 seconds for this.
Just 30 seconds. I'm not Anand Ranganathan. So, yeah, but I think, the immediate face of politics in India, I think it's in favor of a so-called right wing. I don't see that changing anytime soon. But yeah, in the long term, we will have to think, what we discussed earlier, that left is still very, very smart at presenting itself as rebellious, as presenting itself as fighting for some grand thing, grand ideas, trying to fight some evil. And they capture the young mind pretty easily, where we fail. So that's one challenge that we will have to keep in mind. We should not leave the young guys to be cured just like we got cured with age. So we will have to do something about that. Otherwise, I think immediate future in India, it's mostly going to be identity politics, no doubt about that, because now the left and right both agree at least on one thing, and that's identity politics. So so the entire good thing about now elections would be all about development and all that. It's all good to to hear and to convince yourself with, but I don't think identity politics is going anytime anywhere soon, and that's where we have an upper hand till the demographics are in our favor.
I was going to ask you about that, but good you brought that up. The demographics is destiny. And we are
Right.
seeing that in large parts or at
Mhm.
least in pockets of the country. I'll not say anything more than that. I think people, they have access to data, they have access to trends, they have access to
Mhm.
voting records. I think it is particularly
It's
myopic or
dangerous.
a
Yeah.
closed mind that refuses to see that reality.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
moving on to the next question by Amit Parihar, he says, "Hi, how do you think we can create an atmosphere in Indian social media where people are not just putting out their contrasting views, but also not outright discarding the opposite point of view? What are your views on healthy discussions online where leftist hypocrisy isn't overshadowing some very rational and logical right-wing points?" So I don't think social media might is possible to have a rational debate at
Yeah,
least now.
I also, yeah, I also
But
agree. Some new platforms might change the nature of discussions. So, like say people are saying Clubhouse, and maybe space, even if it's on Twitter, maybe the spaces could change. Maybe I hope so, but I think it has been spoiled beyond redemption. The social media. I mean, we have lost our ability to have a conversation over there. So we are always in a fighting, and it's true for every shade of ideological spread. So I don't think. I mean, maybe free markets in the same way we will figure out something, but the social media as it is today, I don't think it's going to become better. No, no, not at all.
Mrityunjay Gupta asks, is it excuse me, is it possible to be a rational person without being leftist or right wing?
Right wing as such obviously is again, I was going to complete the sentence, but then I realized right wing, the term itself is, how do you define, but so far as if you are committed to any ideology, I don't think, how do you define rationality? Uh, I think it's not possible. I mean, obviously, every ideologue will say that he can be a leftist as well as a rationalist, or somebody can say that I can be a pretty much a religious guy as well as a rationalist. But it's I don't know. I mean, it's all boils down to definitions. How you define rationalism. I mean, obviously, currently I am very much partisan. I'm very much for the Hindutva, so-called Hindutva politics, and I believe honestly that rationalism is very possible over there. But when you get into too much of, say, scriptural things and traditional things, what say are trads, which again I have full respect for, but then at some point of time it starts looking that it's not rational. I don't know, it goes into the I think realm of philosophy, that how exactly do you define rationalism. uh, but in common parlance, I mean, in the way we believe, I I think the easy answer would be that it's a little difficult. If you are very committed to an ideology, you cannot be completely a rationalist. I don't think so. That would be my honest
Hmm.
answer. Yeah.
Interesting. It's
Hmm.
uh, yeah, that's something that we can debate a whole lot. But I'll move to the next one.
Precisely. Yeah.
An anonymous attendee asks a very interesting point. Uh, would like to draw my question on the word cool. Right wingers, be it young or old, lack that coolness apparently and lose the argument mostly. What do you think can be a concrete step for the win?
See, the problem why we are not cool is, you know, in order to be cool, you know, it's all very fast, very quick, very palatable that you are saying, you know, and that is something right cannot say, because the wider context is being set still by the left. So, you know, when you crack a joke, I mean, humor is still to an extent with us. So when we say something, uh, say why right wingers are say more popular on Twitter, for example. So the wider context is being provided over there by the right wing. The voices are very, you know, like vocal over there. Or say Rahul Gandhi is equal to Pappu is has become, for example, an accepted fact, for example. So it becomes easy for you to push something very quickly in a palatable form. But in the wider context, in the social context, the young people don't even have a context of, you know, information about stuff that you are trying to tell them. So it becomes very difficult to be cool in that sense, because what you are trying to say, they have no context of it, they have no information about it. If it's about, say, love jihad, you know, I mean, we can debate that, okay, whether to use this term or not. But say if you are trying to say something about that, how do you do anything in a cool way, unless you have so much of stories, unless you have put in so much of information that the guy or the girl standing in front of you immediately can relate to what you are trying to say. Then you can even think of something cool. You know, I mean, like anything cool or anything joke or anything snazzy, it's all a derivative of something that's already existing. Something original cannot be cool. You know, I mean, a theory of relativity cannot be cool as such. So something original will always be complex. It will be always be, nuanced. It will be detailed. Cool is always a derivative of those things. So unless we have created that context, unless we have created those stories, and people have a understanding of it, it becomes a difficult job. And that's where, you know, hopefully, some of the people in the Bollywood who appear to be warming up to the entire idea of so-called right wing. For example, abhi R Madhavan ki movie Nambi Narayan ki aayegi. Now people would see, people would get a lot of context. फिर आप उसमें से derivative करके आप बहुत सारी चीजें cool कर सकते हो, जिससे you can push your things. So that's where we are lacking. It's not like we are lacking in ideas, but we are lacking that original thing, that original narrative, the wider narrative, that's not so popular, that hasn't reached the young generation in various forms.
Interesting. I perhaps I think we need to have another chat just on this part, because this seems a lot more complex. I think now that you've touched upon some of these things, we have a lot of questions. So one thing I'll do is I'll share them with you in any case, but I want to take a couple of them in particular. So Aditya Srivastav asks, there are few youngsters who are generally supporters of BJP and Modi, but they are still woke and get excited by tokenism. What, in your opinion, could be done to incline them towards non-left and make them see the truth?
Unless I have context or details of it, because these words have become so meaningless these days. You know, woke, obviously, one can imagine what it could be. But I don't think woke in the sense that, that you insist on pronouns, that you insist on, being always ashamed of your identity if you are a white or a Brahmin, or, such kind of thinking. I still don't think these people are BJP or Modi supporters. So what I'm sorry, I forgot the name of the person who put the question. How he or she sees what is left would need, I would need a little context before, I can answer. But in broad sense, in theoretical way, I think these things don't really, they were always meaningless in Indian context. This whole left versus right thing. What perhaps currently, we can kind of agree upon is that there is a dharmic way and there is a non-dharmic way. That kinds of separates broad two ideologies. Because some of the values of the left, say environmentalism, a sadhu is also doing a fast and to death to save a river, and at the same time your Medha Patkar is also trying to save a river. So now the both things are in a way left. I mean, is trying to save a if trying to save a river is left, then is that Sadhu a leftist? So so in that sense, uh, that's where I'm saying that a little bit of context, a little bit of details would be needed. What exactly are you terming as left? Because mostly, I mean, while we have adopted, even in my book, I have used left winger, right wingers, frankly, and I have put it in the introduction part of my book also. These are meaningless broadly in the Indian scheme of things. But since it's used in popular parlance, I have also used. Uh, but in terms of this particular question, I would need to understand, say, with an example, what
Okay.
exactly is there.
So this was asked by Aditya Srivastav, and I would
Aditya,
suggest
sorry.
Aditya that you can post this on Twitter and tag Rahul, and
Hmm.
perhaps
Say for
meaningful
I
conversation can take place.
yeah, maybe say perhaps he means, say, the feminist, for example, the ideas. Again, I don't think unless you are in this, I don't even know the second, third, fourth wave or whatever wave of feminism you are talking about. But the core idea of feminism, that women have an independent existence and they should be equal to men, that's not against our dharmic principles. We are the only kind of religion or culture where women deities are perhaps they are stronger than male deities. So one has to look into the context. So that's where I was saying that left and right anyway is not so meaningful here.
Correct. And to that end, Jasmine Shah's question also touches upon the same things, and I'll read it out just for completeness. So she says that I wonder whether we need to distinguish between right wing as understood in the West and what it
Right,
means to be right wing in the Indian context.
right,
And she
right.
says, to me, right wing in the West is purely an economic position in favor of large corporates. What is right wing in India?
Mm,
So I think, to paraphrase what you said, the context is something that matters a lot when talking about right and left wing phrases. But for lack of a better, more widely understood phrase, we tend to use them simply to
precisely.
get the discussion going.
Right. True.
So okay, so this is a slightly different one by Aniket Kumar Shah, and he says, I'm also from a small town, Jogbani, Bihar, and I am in my final year of Bachelor's of Journalism. I have two career options, that is appearing for UPSC, which is something you talk about in your book, appearing for UPSC and pursuing journalism. Please guide me as I'm 21 years old. I want to pursue journalism, but my father wants job security, which is an IAS. Please advise. It's
See,
almost
if
like
you
going back in a time machine and
actually, I mean, fortunately, my parents left me कि ठीक है तुम्हें जो करना है करो. But yeah, I mean, it's not like when parents insist on something or they advise something, it's they are controlling because they have their own experience to say. And if your father thinks that the government job or the UPSC thing is better, I won't really find fault with him. Obviously, it's better than being a journalist. I mean, to be very blunt with you, unless you become a Rajdeep or a Barkha, or, or people like them, obviously a bureaucrat's job will give you, in practical terms, a better lifestyle, a better earning opportunity. Than in journalism, it's very exploitative, and people on the top earn a lot, people on the bottom don't. I mean, that's how that people on top earn a lot, because people on the bottom at the bottom are not earning a lot. When 200 people or 100 people are laid off in network 18, nobody cares. But when Rajdeep and Sagarika are asked to move out, then it's attack on media. So that's how journalism is. Unfortunate truth is that, I mean, obviously there are new media avenues coming up like Swaraj and Op India, but we are not so big that we can absorb all the labor market. So journalism labor market still remains your mainstream media, and that's I don't want to discourage you. Journalism obviously it's fascinating field, but if you want to express, write, or comment that you can do even while doing any other job also. So and unless you really strongly believe in this trade, I mean, how you define journalism, that also will be something that needs to be answered. But if you are so much into it, I mean, like most of the guys working in Op India, many of them don't have they don't come like me from a journalism background. I mean, they haven't done any journalism course, but they strongly felt about it, like, no, we want to be doing full time. Then most welcome. Obviously, it's a wonderful field. You get a lot of satisfaction. It's almost like being a doctor or a soldier, or I mean, you get that sense of self importance. If that's important for you, then most welcome. But the industry, harsh realities are like that you have to, initial years are very struggling. And if you are left stuck in a big media house, and you have to pretend to be somewhat left leaning, unless you reach a particular stand, you cannot really, I mean, assuming that you are here talking to me, then you are somewhat so-called right leaning. So in that sense, you will have to curtail your natural ambitions, natural thought process, to grow up in this industry, to grow in this industry, not grow up. You have already
Uh,
grown up.
so there's some more questions, Rahul, if you have maybe another 5 minutes.
Sure. Yeah.
Thanks. So Aniket Kumar Shah, again, he says beautiful book. So that's good to hear and read. Uh, I'm scrolling through, and so there's Parv Chauhan who says, just finished your book and it was like tracking my own journey. So as I said, it's like reading a slice of your own life in certain
Mhm.
parts. So okay, so Parv Chauhan again says that makes you a miracle if you survived Arundhati Roy, and I completely agree. Uh,
Uh,
Another comment on Arundhati Roy doing a project with the role model as Arundhati Roy. So my sympathies for you, Ruturaj. And
okay,
Manoj Gupta's.
there's Mrityunjay Gupta here. I just saw how much chance that Rahul Roshan goes back to be Arundhati types. So this is, so I would actually want to answer it. That
Yeah, sure.
yeah, I mean, I should already tell that there are only two ways in which I might become Arundhati Roy types. Either I am given 1,000 crore rupees, or somebody kidnaps somebody in my family and says that do this, otherwise we would kill this person. Yeah.
ठीक है. Okay, fair enough.
Uh, one
Uh,
1,000 crore inflation adjusted. This is 1,000 crore current price. Mhm.
that's a good point. That's a good point. You're talking about net present value.
Yeah. No, but jokes aside, I don't think I have passed that that line, and it's not like I'm a 20 years old who has just got into some new insight, and I'm finding it cool, so I become right winger. I'm getting it more retweets, so I have become so-called right wingers. No, actually, I was getting a very decent salary in Network 18 when it was acquired by Reliance. I took a salary cut and then started all this thing. Tomorrow, if say Congress comes back and starts hounding, I have no future in media. So it's not like this is something that I have done because of some monetary gains or because of some practical benefits that I was deriving. It's a very conscious, very emotional decision that I have taken. So the worst that can happen is that I can become silent. That I can say, यार छोड़ो, कुछ नहीं रखा है, और अपना लाइफ में कर जाओ, अरुंधति रॉय बनने से तो मेरा वो तो it's impossible. Yeah.
Good, you clarified that. Uh,
Yeah.
so, Parv Chauhan has a question. The students in sociology do not read and have no clarity of theory. I'd like to maybe expand on this. We talked about reading, and you said that the culture or habit of reading has somewhat declined. It's not. So, do you want to answer Parv's question and perhaps also make some recommendations on what people can read, how they can develop the reading habit? Because I've had so many people also ask me that, I find it so difficult to read an entire book, or as part of the 1,000 Reviewers Club, people I can see they struggle to write even, good short reviews of books.
Mm-hmm. Uh, I think I don't know how to do it. I mean, like I myself am not a very what you call a voracious reader as such. But it's if I want to read something, obviously I will finish it. So if somebody is reading it as a like they have to work out in a gym, and they have to get their shape body shape in order. I am not sure that's how reading should be taken up. Even though it's an habit that you cultivate, it's a disciplined work that you have to done. In that sense, obviously, it's very similar to say exercising or working out in a gym. But you pushing yourself to do it, I don't think to the limited understanding or experience that I have with reading, that's not how it might work. I think you should always start with what interests you. So your choice of topics is very important. Even if Chetan Bhagat interests you, start with reading his book, ek do padho, and then once you get into a habit बनाने के लिए कम से कम आपको कुछ लाइट चीज लेनी होगी ना. Then you start graduating to other things. And then there are online you have, I mean, it's a dichotomy that because of internet, actually people's attention time has shortened, but still it's such a beautiful technology. You can read so many things. I mean, uh, for example, we have discussed so many things over here. एक दो कोई चीज लगी होगी, या तो स्ट्राइकिंग या अटपटा लगा होगा, go Google about it, try, maybe you end up on a long form kind of a thing. And because now you have a context, with you have an interest in that particular thing, you start reading. And that's how that habit can be cultivated. But if you are forcing yourself to read, I think like we used to do when we were preparing for, say, CAT, or those exams, when you
Right.
have to read. It's because you have to get into you have to get the high percentiles. That's also one of the ways, but I don't think that works, especially in reading. I mean, if you have a entrance exam to crack, that's a different thing. But that doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way.
So true. It's again, it's like, yeah, I agree with you. From my own personal experience, I can say that reading is a habit that you can get into, and unfortunately, it's very easy also to fall out of the habit of
True,
reading.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah,
So ऐसा
that's
नहीं
so
है कि like साइकिलिंग एक बार साइकिल चलानी सीख ली तो जिंदगी भर आप साइकिल नहीं भूलोगे
right.
होता है तो
Internet has ruined me. I mean, my reading habits, internet has ruined me. But if somebody doesn't have that habit, then internet can help you actually. You those baby steps you can take through internet, and you can start reading. But as Abhinav rightly said, it's in that sense, obviously the comparison with exercising, it's so perfect. You drop your guards a little bit, you start eating samosa and all that, you get out of shape immediately. And same happens with reading as well. Yeah.
very true. So Rahul, we have many other questions. What I will do is I will take them and I will send them to you, and if you
Sure.
want you can take anyone or one or more, whatever you prefer. You can ask you can perhaps take them up on Twitter or elsewhere.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank everyone who attended. We had a huge number of people who joined. So thank you again all for joining. Thank you, Rahul,
Thanks.
for coming on to this Q&A. And folks, as I said, we will be putting this up on our YouTube channel, and I will share the link in a few days when that is available. Any last comments, Rahul?
Well, I wasn't expecting that. So because it was a question and answer. I was there, and there was no set agenda that we discuss over here. So in that sense, I don't have a closing comments or anything. But yeah, I mean, the way it ends in my book as well. And somebody had asked the question also, that we should keep the conversation going. That's very important. And it's good that through Indic Academy also things are happening. We are different kind of books, different kind of ideas we are imbibing, and we keep on the conversation going. Even if, most important is that, I mean, after having fought with left, so-called, uh, again, not getting into the technicalities of what left and right is, but we know that having fought with them so much, we have in a way become, our way of debating has become very aggressive, with even with ourselves. So that's one thing, I think, we people on the so-called right, we need to forget about how to make discussions on Twitter and elsewhere better. But if we can, in our own little spaces, if we can start this culture of communicating to each other, debating a few things in a non-Twitter way, that would be very helpful for entire movement.
Very well said. And on that note, thank you, Rahul. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.